All right. Okay, so we were talking about debt and deficit, and of course there were a couple of questions on that test about debt deficit, where our current national debt is, what the difference between debt and deficits and surpluses are, and some, talk about something, in terms of the likelihood that Social Security will be there for you. Tomorrow night we have the first of the presidential debates. I assume it's going to go off. I don't know why it wouldn't, other than if something happens and someone has to cancel. But I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll see. Crazy times. So I hopefully you tune in and to kind of see President Trump's a known quantity. We've been watching him for the last 4 years. Joe Biden should be a known quantity. He's been, in politics for, as long as I've been born, alive, basically. So some 47, 48 years. I'm 51, so not quite that long, but I think he was elected in 73, 72, something like that. But so he's been around. He should be a known quantity. He's run for president a couple of times, and was vice president under President Obama not so long back. But again, given the fact that many of you are still pretty young, you may not have been paying close attention to. And the vice presidents tend to take a backseat, obviously, to the president. Oftentimes they're in the shadows. So we may not know as much about Joe Biden as we want to know. So again, this is a good opportunity to kind of, see him in action, get an understanding whether you believe what he's putting forth is something that he can deliver on. And whether or not it matches up with your interests, right? Remember that quality of life hill, and having a government that's tailored to, again, your interests, whether it's freedom or equality, whether it's a single issue that drives your decisions. Hopefully it's not, but if it is, seeing where they lie on that issue. And I'm hopeful that a question regarding Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare, and even taxation, that comes up. And the two candidates for office can talk about their future plans for, how they're going to maybe rein in the spending, or if not, how they're going to rein in the spending, how they're going to maybe better distribute that or allocate those resources, as the case may be. Of course, we recognize that they don't do it on their own. That that we, as a system of checks and balances, allow the legislative branch to play the part of deciding on that allocation by design. It makes sense. Those are the individuals who are most closely, to you, most close to you. This is when you go back to that, who represents you. I think an understanding that we talk about districts. We choose people from these districts because we want them to understand where your interests lie, right? Somebody from the 3rd congressional district, which would represent Calhoun County, that person's from the west side of Michigan, so central west side of Michigan. And so the issues that impact us at the national level here, regarding trade, regarding agriculture, regarding maybe hospitality, those are big issues here and affect a lot of the families here in this area. And those issues we come at it maybe differently than we would come at the issues of West Virginia, which may be more about coal and mining, energy as issues, which aren't really our issues here in terms of coal. For example, that we all share in these bios. I get it. But you know what I'm saying? So we choose individuals who represent our interests, and we choose them from among us so that they can then make decisions regarding what government should or shouldn't do based upon their constituents in mind. And hopefully they've walked a little bit in our shoes just so we know that person will represent our interests, the collective interests here. And we do that at levels, right? So the congressional district has about 500 plus thousand individuals, and I think it's like 590,000. It's probably higher than that now. But let's just say 600,000 people in that congressional district, right? You get down to a state senate district, now it's about 250,000 people. And you get down into a house district, now it's about 90,000 people, right? You get into a county commission district, well, it depends on how many people are in your county, and in that district, but we're talking about even fewer individuals. So you get some sense that the persons at these more local districts, they're going to be much more closer to understanding your interests and the things that are important to you, because they're going to be in a much, closer area to you. They might be your neighbor. I mean, any of them could be your neighbor. But again, at the same time, the likelihood that that person who's making decisions at the county level from your county district, that they have a really good understanding of what the issues are regarding the roads, the safety of the streets, and whether you have street lights or not. That they'll understand when you say, hey, we need to fix North Street. They'll know what North Street is. Right? Talk to your congressman about North Street. They'll find out for you. They may know, but generally speaking, they've got a larger area that they have to represent. And of course, your U.S. senators, 2 senators who represent you, they represent the whole state, right? So they're representing the whole state. Now, again, the districts are tied all the way and contained within the states at least. The president of the United States represents everybody, right? But our elected officials, the legislators, the ones who are making the laws, they represent us at least contained within the state. And that's by design, right? That's by design. Remember, when the Constitution is ratified, it's the states that create the central government. The states are already in existence. So the national government is really created for the states. It's the states that determine that this is to be in our best interest. And again, of course, the states are made up of people. And so when you read the preamble of the Constitution, which was a requirement over the course of the weekend, it was we the people, you got to finish that, we the people of these United States, So we the people of the states, right, in order to form a more perfect union, not that our union is bad, not that it's screwed up too greatly in the Articles of Confederation, but to make a more perfect union, more perfect, right, do propose this contract. Right, for everything else that it says, it's basically saying do propose this contract. And the mission, it's almost a mission statement. So it's identifying the things that are of importance and of need, right? So you got domestic tranquility, right? We got Shays' Rebellion going on. So how do we ensure domestic tranquility, right? So, and then prosperity, right? We have the issues of taxation and trade that are still being hashed out as we try to find our footing in the world order after the American Revolution. So it's a bit of a mission statement, if you want to consider the preamble a mission statement, that then gives us an understanding of what the rest of the Constitution is meant to do. Now, constitutional scholars, judges, justices who've interpreted the Constitution and contract, they don't put much weight behind the preamble to the Constitution. There's nothing there that would be decidedly a law or something that the federal government has to aspire to make sure they do in deference to the contract, right? So you're not guaranteed domestic tranquility or general welfare. That's just the mission of this contract and this relationship with the national government. So that's the preamble. Then Article 1 of the Constitution leads us then into the primary branch, as far as I'm concerned, that's Congress. Congress is you. Congress is me. Congress is you and I. If we take this notion that government gets its power from the consent of the governed, power flows from the consent of the governed. Well, who's the governed? Well, that's all of us, right? We're the governed. And then we, rather than have a direct democracy, we empower some representative of us, some member from our chambers, from us, to then tell government what to do. That's the first branch. So if we can go back to the policy process, build, formulate, adopt, implement, and evaluate. It's both simple in design, close to the scientific method, simple in design, universal. So no matter where in the world an entity calls itself a government or a governing body, it will go through these same 5 steps. Even Kellogg Community College has a governing body, right? It has a board, has a president, has a structure. That board, right, plays the role of the legislature. It identifies issues, comes up with solutions, chooses the best solutions, and then empowers the executive to carry out those solutions. And of course, evaluation, formal evaluation is where the courts come in. We'll talk about that again, and we'll touch on it already, but talk about it later as we get into Article 3.
But that evaluation of is there still a problem, we're all a part of that, right? Both from the institution and the individuals, you the students, all have a hand in identifying those issues that may need to be addressed on the college level. And generally speaking, we keep those requests, complaints, suggestions in-house because the executive, the president of the college, has really been empowered to address those issues, right? To be nimble rather than to take those issues back to a board. You know, the board is often fairly clunky. It's a lot of formalities to passing policy. But there may be some changes that need to be taken all the way up to the board for them to be, you know, across campuses, all campuses for all students. At any rate, bottom line is, if it calls itself a governing body, it's going to go through these 5 steps. If it's somebody who's making decisions regarding who gets what, even if it's the boss even goes through these 5 steps, right? They're universal. So when we look at the Constitution, you get the preamble, which is kind of our mission statement. Kind of gives us at least some understanding of what this entity that we're creating in the Constitution is supposed to do. That's the preamble. Helps to frame the duties. And then we go about the structure of this process. So these steps of forming policy, the policy process, the process, right? This is how we decide who gets what, which is the function of government, which is politics defined. These 3 steps, well, this is it, right? These are the legislative powers. So you remember in high school, you remember in your civics classes, your 8th grade government class, you remember that ours is a system of checks and balances, right, with 3 separate branches, right? These branches then have their own powers, right? Legislative, executive, and judicial. Those are the powers that are identified. Well, how are they powers? What makes them powers? How are these entities empowered? So the first words of Article 1, right? The legislative power shall be vested in a Congress. So Congress is the entity, the part of government, right, that carries out this part of the policy process. So the powers of Congress, or the legislative powers, these are the legislative powers. The first power of Congress is to formally say, yeah, this is a problem. This is a problem. To formally say this is a problem. Now, you and I, we're the ones, right? We're the ones who say, hey, we think this is a problem. No, we think this is a problem. No, we think this is a problem. Right? We're all applying that pressure. But in the end, when it comes to making laws, particularly at the federal level, the national level, the legislator has to say, yeah, you know what, this is a problem, let's work on this. If they don't, then there's no problem. You say, well, yeah, there's a problem. Well, I'm just saying formally, if they don't agree there's a problem or the problem has a high enough priority within this mission, then it goes nowhere. They ultimately decide, right? These representatives we elect are the ones who decide what gets worked on and what doesn't. Right? And this is what campaigns are. We're in the middle of being told what these elected officials think are their priorities or how they'll address your concerns. Right? I'm a listener. Hey, when you come, I'm a listener because I'm a fighter for the district. That doesn't tell me what you're going to do. It tells me how you're going to do it. Or at least it's trying to instill within me some confidence that if I choose you to represent me, you're gonna work on the problems that I see are problems. Or when asked questions, or even in their own campaign, they may identify things that they're going to work on. Right? We need to protect the environment. Right? We need to reduce our national debt. We need to reduce our footprint overseas. Whatever it is that they're
Right? That doesn't really give us too much, kind of gives us a general scope of what they think are problems or kind of the areas of the problems that they're going to focus on. But that doesn't really give us a direct, this is what I'm going to do. All right? Something maybe more direct would be somebody saying, look, you vote for me, I'm going to pass or promote or push legislation that protects our pre-existing conditions regarding healthcare. Well, that's a lot more narrow. That's a lot more specific. That's not just I'm going to protect your health care. That's not just that I want to have a healthy community, or I'm just going to listen to you. That gets us pretty specific, right? And there we can start to make kind of our decision. How important is that to us? Is that very important? Sort of important? Maybe if I'm an older individual, it's more important than if I'm a younger individual. So we start making decisions based upon how these representatives are going to shape or identify the problems that government is supposed to be working on for us. And trust me, there's always problems to be working on, right? Let's not forget that the problems of the conservative are not necessarily the problems of the progressive. So when this group of individuals says, hey, everything's hunky-dory, don't mess this up, probably have a group of individuals saying, hey, this isn't working the way it's established. We need to change this. Change, no change. Right? So one man's problem is not necessarily another man's problem. So when we have these problems that we want identified, now it depends on who are you putting in there, right? We're going to put individuals in there who want to keep things the way they are, or work within the current system, or the current interpretations of the Constitution, or do we want somebody who's going to come in and change the system, change the way things are, and change the interpretation of the Constitution, change what the federal government ultimately does? It's not doing enough. And this is what ultimately gives us our two-party system, really. I mean, we could say it's multiple parties, but two-sided system, right? More government or less government? What's it going to take? Right? Do we want something that gets us closer to equality? At the extreme? Or freedom? At the extreme, which way we want to go? You can see where most people are. Right here in the center. Right? So this is where our Democrats and our Republicans hang out. So we're choosing representatives to represent our issues, represent our interests, what we identify as problems, who's going to be able to take care of those problems. That's how we should be choosing our elected officials. Doing an assessment, what we think is important, and then picking the individual who we believe is going to best address those things. And I think we've got to keep in mind that even though we may have multiple candidates from multiple parties running for the same seat of representation, right? Chances are, very strong chances are, it's going to end up being a Republican or a Democrat. Just because of how it's structured, again, how we get these parties spread out through the spectrum, where our libertarians may be out here and our socialists may be out here. And if we want to call these Greens, if we want to call these individuals U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Constitution Party or Taxpayers Party, they're all within our spectrum here. And if we look at the distribution of the population, it's pretty equally distributed. It's actually a little center right, but it's pretty equally distributed. So if we take off a big chunk of the voters here, and that chunk goes to a third party, these are individuals from the right who, all things being equal, more likely would have voted for the Republican candidate versus the Democrat candidate, all things being equal. Generally speaking, freedom versus equality, right? All things being equal, generally speaking, these individuals more than likely would have voted for the candidate on their side, then crossed all the way over and voted for the other individual. Now, there are some issues that create strange bedfellows, so to speak. Libertarians and socialists, libertarians and even the Democrats, can maybe see eye to eye on some issues regarding drug policy, transgenderism, gay marriage, gambling, prostitution. They may see eye to eye on what the policies should be, or maybe what the policy effect should be, but they usually do it based upon separate ideologies, right? Different ideologies along the spectrum. Right? This is our equality side over here, right? Yeah, correct? And then this is our freedom side over here, right? So if we think about freedom, we think about the role of government. From the libertarian standpoint, more often than not, they take a position on these issues that they shouldn't be criminalized. Not necessarily a good idea or not a good idea, but they shouldn't be criminalized because there's no business of the government. It should be the individual making the decision. If I want to gamble my money away, let me gamble my money away. If I want to shoot heroin, let me shoot heroin. It's my body, right? Even the abortion issue, right? From the liberal side, I should say, the socialist Democrat side, the side over here that's more towards the side of equality, it's equality issues. It's like, how is government coming down on the different groups of individuals? Is there an equality issue? Is it a bunch of guys telling women what to do, right? Or is it the majority telling African Americans what to do? Who's disproportionately impacted by the drug policies, right? Does it cross across all groups equally, or is there one group that's being disproportionately negatively affected? And if that's the case, we got to change these policies, not for freedom's sake, but for equality's sake, right? So different, again, different mindsets, different ideologies from where these individuals may come from, but coming up with the same maybe objectives. Does that make sense? All right. So, but generally speaking, again, we start slicing and dicing our base off here. Our libertarians vote for the libertarian candidate, or U.S. Constitution, or even a Reform Party candidates vote for their candidate. You begin slicing your base. And so, all I'm saying is be cognizant of that. Now, when you vote third party, the chances of your candidate actually getting elected are not high. Not impossible. The more local the level, it really comes down to the person more so than the political parties. But as you get further and further away into the state offices and certainly into national offices, and then certainly the president, particularly with the Electoral College, good luck there. But as you're thinking about who you're going to vote for, this person may line up with your interests really good, but how many individuals are they going to be attracted to that candidate? And then what happens if your vote goes to this candidate? What happens to the chances the next candidate closest to you actually getting your vote? Some states are going to what's called ranked choice, which kind of allows a person to vote first, third party, just to see, right? Just to see if there's an opportunity for victory, and if it's not there, then they can cast their vote for the next best candidate to them. Right? Has anybody heard about that? No? Kind of convoluted, but it's, and I always say convoluted, I just mean it creates another couple layers of what can become fairly complex to the voting process, and trying to have an understanding as to how do I participate. But, and we're going to see how that ranked choice voting works in earnest this next presidential election. And we may see that, hey, that's a better way to truly represent the interests of the people in choosing their representatives. Because this third party slicing and dicing, that creates some problems. Okay. So we're choosing individuals to identify formally the problems. Right? The next step then, after the problem is agreed to, right, after the legislature says, all right, this is a problem, I'm going to work on it, is then to make the problem precise and to begin coming up with solutions. To truly get an understanding of the problem, and then to come up with solutions. And so this is really brainstorming here. Brainstorming possible solutions based in the context of what is the problem. What are we talking about? What is the problem? How does it affect individuals? Does it affect everybody? Is there a subset? There's one group we can work on, right? What can we, those are all questions as we begin to come up with that solution. I think we talked about it, but if we didn't, the policy process is something that we really inject into our everyday life in terms of our decisions we make. You guys all made a decision here to get up and come to class. These are all decisions, right? What's the pro? What's the con? How best do I get here? What's the downside if we don't address this issue, right? Those are all questions. What to wear today? What you had for breakfast? These are all questions. So you go through this process. You don't even think about it. You go through this process every time you make a decision, right? Some of our snap, easy, instinctual. Others take a lot of planning and consideration. I mean, taking classes at KCC, what are you trying to get at? Maybe the bigger problem is, what's my career going to be in the future? How am I going to support myself and the family in the future? And that's the bigger idea. That's the issue.
You're formulating a plan, and you're in the middle of that formulation. Part of it is going to college, getting specialized in an area, right? So you're in the middle all the time. We're in the middle of these steps, and constantly evaluating whether or not what we did was good or not. Net plus, net negative. And if it's a net negative, we don't do it again, or we tweak it somehow to make it a net positive. But we're always doing that. And your government is no different than that, or at least by design it's no different than that. Right? It's this entity that's making decisions about problems that need to be addressed, and then constantly interpreting the effectiveness of those decisions to identify whether or not we need more solutions, new solutions, or if the conditions have changed that have created new problems. That's what's going on. Where's your place in this process? Well, first and foremost, it's right here. It's in the choosing of the people who represent you. That's your first step in the process. That's your first empowerment, if you will, in the process. And I think hopefully gave you some bit of a recipe as to what to think about as we begin to choose the individuals who represent us. How are their decisions going to affect me? How are their decisions going to affect my decisions? I'm in the middle of going to college right now. I want to come out with a job. How do the decisions of the individuals that we're putting in office today, how do they affect the decisions that I'm trying to deal with myself? Right? So trying to know where those candidates are. And here's another thing. Hopefully, knock on wood, you're not going to be in college forever, right? Right? Hopefully you're not going to be in college forever. Right? I have been. It's my job. Hopefully you're going to get through whatever you're trying to do, and you're going to go on and be successful in whatever it is that you're attempting to do, right? That's the objective. That's the end goal. Well, your situation is going to change. You're not going to be a college student 10 years from now, hopefully 3 years from now, right? But 10 years from now, Dr. Bailey, right? But whatever it is that you ultimately choose to do, hopefully you're able to move on. When that happens, your interests are going to change. How many of you have families right now? Married, have kids? Married kids?
I'm married, just kidding.
Not married kids? Well, that's right. You have a family, right? Your interests regarding your child are a lot different than the majority of individuals who don't have any children, right? And once if you all choose to go that route, once you have children of your own, or have that home mortgage, or have that summer home that you wanted, the decisions that you make that are shaped back to your life are going to change. They should change. Right? Things like going to college and getting a degree should change your ability to move up the quality of life hill. Rational, right? You want to move up, or at least not slip down, right? So if the decision you're making regarding college, from all the information that we know, that we pitch to you, and that you are much better off with a college degree than not a college degree. Why? Because it opens up those doors, and it makes it easier for you to move up the quality of life hill. So once you finish college, you should be in a different position. You shouldn't be worse off. God, I hope not, right? You're wasting a lot of time here. If you're worse off, you get a degree, it's like, man, you're not quite employable anymore. Well, wait a second. I know political science. Oh, good. Right? So the objective ultimately is to put yourself in a better position so you can continue to work up that quality of life health. Under the current system, that includes college. Under the current system, that includes figuring out how to pay for college. We could change that, right? We could make college, quote unquote, free. Never free. Somebody's getting paid. Hopefully it's me, right? Yeah, somebody's getting paid. But when we talk about free to the user, free to the individual, well, the taxpayer's got to take care of that. 26 trillion, what's another couple $1 trillion? But the point is that for your interest, we could change the system and make it easier for you to obtain that goal, to have that better quality of life. So if there's a candidate out there that's pitching that, maybe that's something you ought to take a look into. Or you look at it and think, by the time that becomes policy, I will have already paid for college. I will already be out there in the workforce. I will be a taxpayer, right? I'm going to be the one who's making it free. Maybe that's not something I want to do yet. Or when you have kids, you're thinking, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford the college for those kids 10 years from now at this exponential growth and inflation and cost of college. Maybe we do need to change the system because it's my interest to make sure that my kids don't have as difficult a time that I have trying to open these doors that education opens. I don't know what the answer is. These are all things that you should be thinking, right? Know thyself. Oh, Socrates there. Know thyself. Know thyself, and then you can know, again, what my problems are, what I want addressed, and begin to apply those to the individuals. Now, the quick and easy thumbnail cheat sheet, freedom and equality. More government, less government. You trust government, don't you trust government? You want more of it, you want less of it. Will it help you, will it hurt you? Those are big, easy questions, and then that gets us into the R's and D's. Right? Sloppy cheat sheet here. Determine whether you're an R or a D. That doesn't have to line up directly every point on the platform, this is me, or this is me. Just weigh it out. Where are you? Are you an R or a D? And once you decide you're an R or D, vote R or D. Unless you know something specific about a candidate, unless you know something that, again, that there are very specific things, these specific candidates are going to push for that are very, very important to you, right? Then you can pick and choose the candidates. But if you're not going to take the time to do that, R's and D's. But I'm a libertarian. I get it. Keep in mind what happens with libertarian votes. But I'm a green. I understand. But keep in mind what happens when you vote third party. Just think, again, my advice, sloppy cheat sheet, R's and D's. You're more intelligent for that, right? I would expect that from individuals who haven't had a political science class. You're taking a poli-sci class. You need to start thinking again how the R's and D's are really going to help you or hurt you. And how these candidates, how effective these candidates are. And how do I involve myself in the winnowing down of these candidates? That takes place during the primaries. Right? Most individuals don't involve themselves in the primaries. In fact, well, when we look at election participation, about 60% of the population votes to begin with. You think it'd be higher than that, 60%. You think it'd be higher than that, but that's a pretty good year. 60%, a little higher than 60%, a little lower than 60%, but about 60%. That's a presidential year. So 40% of the eligible voters, you're thinking, where are these people? How are they not interested in who the president is? Don't they have a Twitter feed? Right? How are they not involved? But about 40% just won't vote. Right? And I'm surprised by that every presidential election because I think, wow, this presidential election is so important. The issues are so big. This has got to touch everybody. And at the end of the day, 55%, 63%, you're right in there. And then president drops off. There's no president top of the ticket. There's governors. The kind of governors who make you wear masks, stay 6 feet apart, right? A lot of power in the hands of the governor, turns out. Who knew? Those elections dropped down to about 40%. So 40% of the eligible voters. So 60% don't even involve themselves. I don't care who the governor is. You probably ought to. They might be a little higher next time around. I don't know. I'm always surprised. But that's 40%. Now you get into local elections, city council, right? County commissioner. Well, county commissioners tend to run at the same time as gubernatorial elections. But you get into those off-year elections, no governor, no president, city council, city election. Man, now you're pushing 15%, maybe, right? And if you're thinking, right, if you're really thinking, you're thinking, man, how much more influence do I have in these city elections than I really, right? Because each person who votes is now voting for, six other people. 6 people staying home who could vote, but they're the ones who are actually choosing the elected official at the city level. 40, 60, 15. And then we talk about primary elections. When we talk about winnowing down candidates within the parties. So which R? Which D? Right? Now, for the presidential primaries, the Republicans already had their candidate for the president. That was Trump. There wasn't any question, there wasn't any issue. But for the Democrats, you may have watched that. It started out, it was pretty full.
right? You had Kamala Harris, you had Bloomberg, you had Biden. There's kind of a litany of candidates, and the Democrats widowed down to their one best candidate, Joe Biden, right? That is the candidate of the Democrat Party. Maybe paid a little bit more attention, maybe so that well, I can't imagine you didn't pay attention to the Democrat primaries, but when it comes to the legislature, they do the same thing, right? Multiple candidates running for office. The 3rd congressional district, of which, again, if you live in Calhoun County, that's your congressional district. The 3rd congressional district, a little weird this time around. You had Justin Amash, who is the incumbent, but he basically dropped out of the Republican Party. He would say the party left him, but he's always been kind of a libertarian in the Republican Party, and never supported really the president of the United States, and really upset a number of the partisans within the district. And so his likelihood of getting nominated again for that congressional seat were really slim. And so he had a decision to make. Knowing that he's going to get primaried and probably lose in the primary, he might not have, but probably lose in the primary, it may have pushed him to say, all right, I'm just going to run libertarian. So for a period of time, it was looking like he was going to run as the libertarian candidate. But then again, situational libertarian candidate, not likely to win. You're going to take your right side down ultimately with you as you slice the base, particularly in close districts. And so there was some talk that he might run for president as a libertarian candidate, but eventually he just didn't run. So there was an opening for multiple candidates when Justin Amash ultimately announced that he just wasn't even going to run for Congress anymore. And so both the Republican side and the Democrat side, and I got to be honest with you, I don't know of the Democratic primary side, didn't seem as heated as the Republican side, but they settled on one candidate, and the Republicans have also settled on one candidate. But during that process of settling on the candidates, you and I could be active there. And now you're talking about 20% of the population that's active in the political primaries. A little more, a little less, depending on the district and depending on if it's an open seat or not an open seat. And to your guess, Gail, right? How much more of an impact you can have in the process if you're active in the primaries. You can choose the candidate who has about a 50-50 shot of getting in and representing you. And being active here is, and again, it offers more power, right? Creates more power for you if you're active and understanding here than waiting to cast your vote when the other 60% of the population is casting your vote. Does it make sense? Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
So what if you already determined if you go full Republican or full Democrat, then why would you vote for the other primary, the other primary side?
Right, you wouldn't. I mean, typically you don't. I mean, some individuals like to say, well, I could have more power if I went over there and tried to feather my nest and pick if you were a Republican, I'm going to pick the most conservative Democrat. So even if it's the Democrat that ultimately wins the district, at least I know I'm getting someone who's not so far left. You know what I mean? That's kind of the mentality that gets Republicans to dink around the Democrat primaries or Democrats to dink around the Republican primaries, especially if your candidate's already settled on. Well, Hazma. I mean, Hazma's the representative, the Democrat representative of this area right now. He's the incumbent. Nobody challenged him. And so if you look up and down the list, depending on how many people are being challenged or how many are kind of set, the Democrats have done a really, in my opinion, pretty good job of kind of identifying their candidates early and then settling on one candidate. Then the reason to involve yourself in the Democratic primary is really, it's reduced because it's already a fait accompli, or it's already a done deal. And so independents anyway, and even maybe some Democrats, they choose not to vote in their own primary and then to do that little feathering of the nest, so to speak, on the right, where there's actually some contention and there's some decisions to be made. it's more likely to happen then. But if it's contested on both sides, Democrats tend to stay to the Democrat side because they want to pick their champion, and Republicans will stay to the Republican side because they want to pick their champion, right? Especially in those districts that are closer to 50-50. Great question. Yeah, so the only incentive is there is if you can really, if you're really astute and you're really in tune, you can really see that it doesn't matter on my side, those candidates are already picked. I could maybe involve myself in picking the more moderate of the candidates over here, just in case the Democrat actually wins it all. Or pick the most outlandish candidate on the left, just so when they go head to head next to my guy, he won't look so conservative or something like that. I don't think that works, generally speaking.
It's like more of like reverse psychology.
Trying.
Politics, but like
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, and it does, I think, happen on the margins, but I just don't think that most individuals think like that they involve themselves in the other party's primary just to try to dink it up or to try to feather their nest. But that would be the incentive why. Excellent, awesome question. All right, so we're picking, right? I've involved myself in the primaries. Okay, so here we are, our steps, right? To power, to empowerment, knowing yourself, getting an understanding of the R's and D's. There are political party platforms and websites out there that kind of help you know where the parties stand. But at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, here's your dividing line. Here's the biggest interest. Equality, equity of government, fair treatment, right? Individual, right? God-given gifts, being able to exercise them with little intervention. I mean, those are the far extremes. And then, how you want to blend those two together, that equality and freedom together. What is your recipe? What is in your interest? That's how you ultimately decide when you're doing R side or D side. Once you've decided that, then I would argue again, a half step before involving yourself in the political party, once you decide you're an R or D, is to think in terms of your interest groups. Right? What are your interests that you have? Right? Are you a hunter? Are you a business owner? Are you a nurse? Are you someone who cares deeply about the environment? Are you a combination of those? Are you a school teacher? Do you have school-age kids? What are those things that really drive your interest? And then recognizing what your interests are, part of this know thyself, you might want to identify those interest groups that can do the heavy lifting for you, versus you constantly applying pressure after the individuals are elected to those individuals to make sure that they follow through on their promises, or maybe identify some problems they didn't identify before, adopt those problems as your own, right? Let your interest groups do that, right? I mean, what's stronger than one voice? Two, right? And what's stronger than two voices? Three, right? And as we multiply that, when you're an elected official, you come knocking on my door, and if I'm good at what I do, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to consider what you do, and I'm going to recognize that you're the tip of the iceberg. If an individual has an issue or a problem, and they come knocking on my door, there's probably 10 people standing behind them who have the same issue or problem. And as the elected official, I should be smart enough to recognize that in my district. Not all elected officials are that smart. So when 15, 20, 30 people come knocking on your door, and they say, this is an issue we want you to take care of, now I can see this is an issue I better take care of. Right? And even though 10, 15, 20 people is not, it's just a drop in the bucket of the 90,000 people you represent, right? Your voice is loud enough that you know that I better do something about this, or this group's not going to be satisfied. Not going to be satisfied with me, not going to be satisfied with my service, so I need to do something, but that's the interest groups. And who are those 10, 15, 20 people? They're people like you that have joined the interest group that then speak for that interest. And so, know thyself. Pick a side. Pick your interests. Involve yourself in the interests. The interest groups. You don't have to necessarily, but the barrier to entry for interest groups is very low. Generally, they want financial support, either for financial support for campaign support, PACs, or financial support to employ the lobbyist or the individual who's always out there barking in the ear of the legislator, shaping, hopefully, their understanding of an issue to the benefit of the members. Right? So they're going to want the dollars. And so there's usually a membership fee, but most interest groups, they allow you to kind of to tie onto to grab onto the shirt tail effect. And you can do that by simply adding your name. If they can't get your money, at least they want your name. So they can come back and say, this individual, and this individual, these are members in your district who are part of our organization. And they're counting on you to do this. Having that name is really the power, because that's the vote. Having the dollars is what allows the organization to get the point across. So again, check out those interest groups, those things that, again, that you're a parent, or you're an aspiring nurse, or you're a hunter, or you're a ball player, or whatever it is that you're interested in, you want to make sure government, if it's dinking around there, doesn't screw it up for you, or can make it better for you. And associate yourself with those interest groups. So, interest groups, political parties, being active early in primaries to pick these individuals. There's your power. It's not just voting. That's not just voting. It's having a reason behind your vote, an understanding behind your vote that makes that valuable. And then taking it to the next step once this individual's in office, helping to control and direct that individual. Right? Sitting in the passenger seat, reaching over and grabbing that wheel every once in a while. That then is your power. And if you feel so inclined, I hope many of you do, if not all of you, take the seat. Why not? Who better to represent you in your district, in your community, than you? You say, but I don't want to do that. That's not my interest. I got other things to do. That's fine. That's why we hire somebody else to do it. Right? But somebody's going to be in that chair. And they're going to be making decisions that are going to affect them. Clearly, I want you in the passenger seat, if not in the driver's seat. I don't want you in the trunk. Okay. So, we elect these individuals with this in mind. They ID the problems. Once those problems are identified, then the legislature actually gets to work. This is the politics. This is the debate. This is where the R's and the D's are put together. And this is where they fight over what are the problems and what are the right solutions. Even if I called you my R's and I called you my D's, even if you all agreed on that there's a problem here, trying to figure out what the solution to that problem is. Right? Is it more government? Is it less government? Is it more taxes? Is it less? Right? We need to put more. Is it more personal responsibility? Are there penalties? What are those penalties? How do they affect individuals? Are we going to pay for it? Do we worry about paying for it? These then become the questions, even when you agree there's a problem, let alone when you disagree there's a problem. Right? And so that's the formulation that's taking place. That's the debate. That's the use of the media, right? To try to gin up the interest groups and the voices of the people back in the district to push your idea. And again, the media is a little biased. It gives an advantage to the group that the media is biased to. I like to think that the media is biased, but it's biased across the board, right? So there's different media outlets that you can seek that will support your interests. I think that's a little bit too bad, because I think that's what people now do, right? If you have a liberal interest, you go to a liberal media, and the liberal media tells you, hey, you're right. I knew I was right, because the liberal media told me I'm right. But if you go to the conservative media and you ask the same question, they say, no, you're wrong. So I don't want to listen to that. I got these people over here, they're going to tell me what over here. And so instead of having a kind of this unbiased media across the board, we've got biased media outlets, whether it's talk radio or newspapers and different television and cable, that we're lining up to listen to because they're going to tell us what we want to hear. And that's too bad. Media really needs to be, or should have been, and it's been like this. My aunt, my older nerd aunt, she tells me it's been like this forever. And there's truth to that. I mean, the first papers, right, newspapers align themselves with the Democrat and the Republican parties. Right? Some of the papers still call themselves the Democrat or the Free Press, or they still attribute themselves to the political parties' pushes, right? So this is nothing new that media aligns itself with a political party and becomes kind of the outlet for this group, because media is not its own entity. It's a money-making entity. And it's trying to sell a product. And so it's going to appeal to its customer base. And that's kind of the downside of this idea of a media. And you say, well, we should make media then free, right? We should fund it publicly. Well, we do that. Well, NPR, right? PBS, those are publicly funded media outlets. I'm not so sure how much you want your government to fund your media, right? I can see you shaking your head. Yeah, right? So media was supposed to be, or should be, or could be that light that shined on government to make sure that you and I are informed when government's not representing our interests or some shady deal that government's doing. We want government and the media to have an adversarial relationship, because then the media serves as the watchdog and allows us to go and say, okay, I can pay attention when it comes time to elect, to get behind, get rid of somebody, impeach somebody. But other than that, I can come over here and do my job and keep working without having to keep my eye on the government, which has their hand in my pocket, which has their hand on my child's shoulder, which has their hand everywhere. I don't have to watch them as closely because I have this professional media that's doing its job, regardless of who's in there, and pointing out with the things that we haven't empowered government to do, or the things outside the Constitution are being done, pointing those things out to us so we can take and snap back to our attention and say, no. Versus us having to do our job and keep an eye on those elected officials at the same time, and government officials at the same time. Now, people say it's your responsibility, you should do it anyway. And I get that. It is your responsibility, you should be doing it anyway. But with a media, a true media, true watchdog media, representing or working for us on our behalf, it makes that job easier. I don't have time to dig through files and files. If I don't have time to illegally get Donald Trump's tax forms, I don't have time to do that, right? So I got to allow the media to do that. It's the media's job to do that. Okay? So media, yeah, unfortunately, I think it has a little bias. We tend to now put it into the tribes even more so than we had in the past. But it's still working to uncover, always working to uncover. So once we elect the individuals to do their job, the formulation takes over. Formulation is to agree, if they do agree that there's a problem, is to come up with a solution. And everything we see in the legislature, the filibusters, the cloture, the killing the filibuster, the introducing of legislation, the sending it to committee, the committee hearings, all of that is tied to this idea of formulation, the brainstorm. Once we've gone through all the brainstorming, if we're going to address this problem, we got to get to the point of adoption. And the last step of the legislature is to adopt, if they can. They may not be able to, right? But if they can, is to adopt. And to adopt is to choose the best solution. Not best, put it in quotes, qualify it, because best to you and I, again, best is it's subjective. What's best for you is not necessarily what's best for you, right? And on top of that, there are a number of different variables that affect how well you can solve a problem. For example, time. How long is it going to take to solve this problem? Right? If it's a problem, it's an issue, we want it to be solved. How long is this going to take? We want to take care of the U.S. debt. Okay, that's a problem. How long is it going to take care of it? Can we do it quickly? No, that's going to cause too much pain. Well, how long do we take to do it then? So time is one of those considerations. Obviously, cost. What's it going to cost to do this? Where's it going to come from? Where are we going to get the money? Those printing presses are churning out as fast as we can. How are we going to bring on some new printing presses? How are we going to pay for it? All right? That might be an issue. And then, of course, there's always the politics. When I say politics, this is kind of more the internal politics. How does this affect the majority? Right? If we solve this problem, does this keep us out of the majority next time around? Do we lose our elected positions? Do we lose our power internally? Maybe we don't want to do this just yet. Or maybe this would be bad for our constituencies. Right? There's also that. Right? I truly don't want to do this but this is the solution we have. So it's the best we can have given time constraints, money constraints, and the politics of the issue. We may have to compromise. You want $3 trillion, we want $1 trillion, maybe we got to go to $2 trillion. It's the best we could do. All right? So that's all part of the political process. That's what your legislature does. Your hand in that process doesn't stop at voting. Your hand should be in that process all the way through your interest groups, through applying pressure, through keeping the pressure up, through at least paying attention to media, right? You have that. That puts you in the passenger seat. All right? That's what a passenger seat is. But it gives you that power. And again, the people in the trunk, the ones who aren't voting at all, they get what they get. Right? Those who are voting but stop at voting, you may get the candidate you want, but then they're off. They're off to the races. And if you're not vigilant and making sure that they're still representing your interests, which is what they're there to do, then you're not going to get out of government what you want. Now, again, for one person to be able to shape the decisions of their legislators, for one legislator to be able to shape the decisions of government, yeah, it's an uphill battle. But you're in a much better position, hands-on, than you are in the trunk. If you want to take on your birthright and control the government that's provided you. That's Article 1. So, Article 1, when you read it, recognize that's the mission of Article 1. That is the responsibility of that first branch of government to structures, and to decide who gets what to allocate. But the states didn't just say, hey, go at it, do whatever you want, wherever you want to do it. The states reined that in. They reined it into those very specific things that are enumerated, in other words, written, because it's a written document, but identified, specifically identified, enumerated in Article 1 as a power that this federal government, the national government, is going to be able to do. The states have their own constitutions. And the states either identify what the state could do broadly, or was very narrow on what the state government could do. But that was up to the states. The federal constitution is product of the states, the debate, the discussion, the ratifying agreements. They went through and wrote out what the powers of this federal government were going to be, so what the problems and solutions could be attached to. And it wasn't so broad. In fact, this, and again, this goes back to rational choice and this idea that I have the power and I'm giving it up. Why would I want to just give it away? I wouldn't. You have the ability right now, I don't know if this can be true or not, but you have the ability to stay out all night if you want to stay out all night. That is your ability. All right? You're an adult as far as anybody else is concerned, and nobody tells you what time you have to come home. All right? We'll just say that that's correct. Okay? I come in and I come knocking on your door and I say, hey, I want you to start staying in. I want you to come home at 12. And you're going to say, well, why do I come home at 12? Right? My answer can't be because I told you. You've got the authority and the power. Why would you allow me to? Because you might decide you want to come home at 12 every midnight every night. That may be your decision, but I'm going to hold that decision to myself. I may want to come home at 1. I may want to come home at 12:30. Right? But I'm going to hold that decision myself. I have the power. Why would you give that up? Why would you give that up? Why would the states give up the authority to defend themselves, their own military, to determine their own currency, deal with foreign countries? Why would states give that up? All right? I think the natural question is, not only why, and I can tell you, and then you can say, oh, well, that's a good idea or not a good idea. The second thing is, I'm going to give you something for this, for the power to come and come home at midnight. What are you going to give me in return? Right? What do I get out of this? And I said, well, here's the thing. It's all about safety. We just want to make sure that you're safe. And to ensure that you come home at midnight, we're going to saddle you up with your own limo driver, your own limo, your own vehicle. You don't have to worry about gas costs, things like that. We'll take you around where you want to go. They're going to make sure that you get back by midnight. But you're going to have your own driver, your own vehicle. They'll take you out. They'll take you clubbing if that's what you want to do. We got that covered. Now the question is that something you'd be interested in doing? And the answer may still be no. But the answer may be yes. Because you're getting something for giving up that power, that authority. And that's when you look at the Constitution, look at it that way. The states are giving up this authority, this sovereignty in these areas. But what are they getting in return? That's the question. Is this better for us? Does this truly provide domestic tranquility and general welfare and prosperity? Does it? If it does, that's not a bad idea. Here's the other thing I want you to think about. I think we talked about this, about selling the car and then you coming back and taking the bike or taking whatever else. You said, yeah, I'll come home at 12 for these things. I expect these things. That doesn't allow me to then come back in and say, oh, hey, by the way, you can only eat pasta on Tuesdays. Well, we didn't negotiate that. Now, where'd that come from? Right? Well, if we're going to drive you around, we have to be able to tell you where we're going to go. And Tuesday pasta is what works out best for us. So that wasn't part of that's the next part of the Constitution and its relationship between the federal government and the states, the national government and the states. It's how far does this Constitution go? How much is it empowered to then determine the things that I can and can't do? Right? Where is slavery in this Constitution? Where is trade in this Constitution? Where is taxes and tariffs that aren't seen as necessarily fair to some states but are fair to other states? Where is that in the Constitution? And those are the questions that then lead an individual to say, you know what, I'm good. You can have your limo back, you can have your driver back. I'll come back and may not if I choose to, if I think it's my best interest, but I probably not. But I'm going to make the decision from now on. That's a civil war, right? That's the southern states saying, this agreement, it doesn't seem like it's the agreement we agreed to, right? This is not the agreement we agreed to. And that's what leads itself to the Civil War. Yes, it's over the issue of slavery, but slavery in that context of, you sold us this. We don't feel we're getting this anymore. We're done. We're taking our sovereignty back. No, can't do that. It affects more than just you. You can't just walk away here now. We got other people counting on you, right? And, this limo has a cost to it. And if you choose not to be a part of this limo scheme, everybody else has to suck up the cost that you were incurring or you were covering or whatever the case may be. And so these individuals, they have a say now. Oh, man. Right? That is so much the Civil War. And it's easy for us to look back and go, oh, slavery. We were on the right side of morality and what is correct and human. But it's more than that. It's a lot more than that. So Congress is set up and it's limited to those things that are then enumerated. So it can identify or work on these problems, these problems, these problems. But what happened? How did this blow up to where it is today? Those words in Article 1, Section 8 limit the areas to where the federal Congress, the problems it can work on. How did it get so large? Well, courts. The importance of the courts becomes relevant really quickly. John Marshall, right, the appointee, right, Marbury versus Madison. John Marshall, the Supreme Court Justice, gives us that outcome of Marbury versus Madison. Judicial review, the ability to review what the Constitution ultimately means and what Congress can or can't do, and thereby what the states can and can't do. And then in the hands of nationalists, expansionists, right, federalist justices, judges who favor the whole versus the individual states, right, the power of the federal government has grown. Pulled back, and it's grown, and it's pulled back, and it's grown, and it's pulled back, and it's grown. What it is today. So if someone were to say to me, well, what can't Congress do? The answer to me is there isn't anything Congress cannot do. For better English, Congress can do anything. You say, well, wait, we have a Constitution. We also have a court system that has allowed the Congress to basically do whatever it wants to do. So let's temper that a little bit. In our system of checks and balances, Congress can do whatever Congress wants to do as long as the courts allow them to do it. And that's where the courts become so important. So, but that role of Congress, identify problems. What problems? Any problems. Come up with solutions. What kind of solutions? Any solutions. And then to choose that solution. That's the role that Congress does. That's your representatives. Right? And of course, what we get is oftentimes the friction between the individuals and the states and the federal government in what they're doing. And the courts ultimately have to, more often than not, decide whether or not what Congress is doing is within the Constitution or not. And decisions over these last 240 some years have grown the federal government to what it is today. intention of the founding fathers, intention of the framers. Certainly, it may have been the intention of the framers who put out the original document. It may be. The Federalist Papers don't necessarily support that, but it certainly was not supported by the ratification delegation. That's where we get the Bill of Rights. I know I've hit that a few times. So, read Article 1 if you haven't read it. Read it over again. It gives you the structure, how the states are going to be represented. Remember, the Senate has equal representation. The states are going to be represented by population. How we determine the population is a big deal because that's where the power is in the House of Representatives, population. The census is a big deal, right? How we counted individuals who were not free persons, right? Slaves and Native Americans untaxed was a big deal because it all led to who had the power to say who gets what, at least the national government, when it came down to numbers. The states were all equal, thanks to the Great Compromise in the Senate, but the Representatives, House of Representatives varies based upon population. It will vary again, like this next census. But the role that they do is to identify the problems, come up with solutions. And we'll break that down into actually how they do that and where, again, your opportunity to inject yourself either through individual communication or through your interest groups happens along the way. Committees, where we start bill legislation, committees is probably where the most work gets done, where the most pressure is applied. But then a final vote, and then the second chamber gets it. And we'll break that bicameral all the way down. We'll even show you a little Schoolhouse Rocky, right, on just the bill, just to refresh your good understanding of how the process works. All right, guys, a lot of talking today. Any questions? All right, keep pushing along, you guys, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Nice job.
What?
It's a good question. Nice job. Hey, Robert, check online. I think you missed that test.
Okay.
There was a test due. I'm going to open it back up for you.
Okay.
So if you can get that done by Wednesday, that would be awesome.
I did it. Did it come out?
Oh, I don't know. When did you do it?
Yeah, last day, right after class.
Really? Okay. I'll take a look at it. If it didn't come out or whatever, if there's a problem, it may stay open. And if it's open, just try it again.
I'll take a look at it right now.
Okay. All right, buddy.
Do it. Thanks. I know all the answers are hard.
And when are the poll volunteering for the polls? Or are those two?
I'm sorry. Say it again.
For the volunteering polls?
Yeah.
What are those two?
So those won't ultimately go through me. Those you'll contact the clerks directly. Yeah, take care, buddy. And they'll set you up. All right. But I would get on that sooner than later.
Yes, sir.
And if you're interested in doing that, there's another opportunity above that of potentially calling in the poll numbers to Detroit, to the Free Press, and they'll actually compensate you for that too. It has to line up. I'm not sure what precincts they're going to necessarily want their information from, but regardless, I do know that working the polls on that Tuesday during the day, that's all paid. So it's a good opportunity to be really involved and at the same time put a little chunk, a little jingle in your pocket, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So, but based on where the links are and stuff that I sent out, contact those individuals directly.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.